Morning guys, Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. We're going to continue today with our navigation series and talk about dead reckoning. And to talk about dead reckoning, we need to get into pace counting, because pace counting, along with an azimuth or a bearing from a map from a known location to an unknown location in a straight line distance, will give you dead reckoning. That should tell you how long it's going to take you to get there, or when you should be there, along with the proper direction of travel. And that's called dead reckoning. So to understand dead reckoning, we first have to understand pace counting and how to use what's called pacing beads. We're going to discuss that during this video, so stay with me guys. Okay, let's talk about pacing beads real fast before we talk about how to utilize pacing beads. Pacing beads are only a counting system, kind of like an abacus, that you're going to use to calculate distance. And depending on whether you're doing it in meters or miles, or kilometers or miles I should say, you're going to do it two different ways. What I'm going to show you today is I'm going to show you how to use your pacing beads set up in kilometers. I generally travel and use my map in kilometers because everything works out in series of tens and hundreds, and I like that. It makes it real simple. Miles are a little bit more difficult for me to calculate, so I tend to stay with things that are easy. I like simple. So basically I have two strands of beads here. I have a whistle on the bottom, don't pay attention to that. That's what I use for classes. My compass is in here. And I have two strands of rope that have beads on them here, of paracord. One has 4 beads on one side, the other has 9 beads. If you're doing this in miles, it has to be different. You're going to do it in eighths of a mile, so you're going to have 8 beads instead of 9 and things of that nature. But let's talk about kilometers for this video. That's the easiest to understand. So we want 9 beads here and 4 beads here. And what that gives us is an abacus or calculator to calculate a 5-kilometer distance. And what you're going to do is you're going to figure out your pace count, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then you will take your beads and you'll start them at the top, and there's a knot there that you can see where I've pushed those beads up against a knot. And what you're going to do is you're going to start walking and counting your paces, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And when you get to 100 meters, or whatever your pace count is, in my particular case it's about 67 on normal flat terrain. So when I count my paces and I get to 67, I drop one of these beads on the side that has 9. That means I've now walked 100 meters. I start my count over again for my paces, and when I get to 67 again, I would drop another bead. Now I've walked 200 meters. And I would follow that all the way through until I had dropped all 9 beads to where I had walked 900 meters. Then I would, on the next count, drop 1 bead on this side, which means I've now walked 1 kilometer. Then I would move these beads back to the top and start over 1 kilometer plus 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters, and so on. And then I drop another bead on this side when I get to 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers. And when these 9 beads are down again after 4 kilometers, I know that the next 100 meters is going to be the 5K mark. So this gives me a way to track navigation as far as distance traveled of 5 kilometers or up to 5 kilometers. Now let's talk about how you factor your pace count so you can use these beads. And you can use anything for pace counting. It could be rocks in your pocket. It could be knots in a piece of paracord. It can be beads of any kind that you can slide up and down like an abacus, just like this. It doesn't matter. We saw something very similar to this on our website. That's basically 2 strands of beads, just like this. White skull beads, I think they are, on paracord. So, let's talk about factoring our pace count, because that's important. Okay. The next thing that we're going to have to figure out is what our actual pace count is. And to do this, you need to factor in several things. It's not as easy as you just go out on the street and mark off 100 meters and walk that 100 meters and count it, and that gives you a pace count that's going to be accurate in the woods. It's not quite that simple. What you need to do is you need to get something that's 100 meter length, whether it be a piece of rope, 100 meter tape, something of that nature, and take it out with you and check multiple terrains, because your pace count will change from flat terrain to uneven or rough terrain to uphill and downhill. Your pace count will change for all of those things. So I suggest that you take a notebook and put a table in it and put flat, uneven, uphill, downhill. And beside that, you would write your pace count. Now, the way you factor your pace count is going to be on the step of the same foot. So if I start to walk and I put my left foot down first and then my right foot, when my left foot hits the ground again, that's one pace. So it's a half, one, a half, two. Every time my left foot strikes the ground, that's one pace for the second time. Now if I start on my right foot, it can be the other way around. Right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, half pace, half pace. So figure out which foot you're going to count your paces off of, left or right, depending on how you walk, and count your paces off the same foot, striking the ground every time. Then what you're going to get is you're going to get a different set of numbers, and I'm just going to make a couple numbers up here real quick. On flat ground, let's say it was 67. On uneven, let's say it was 70. Uphill, you're not going to be able to step as far going uphill, so you're going to shorten, your pace is going to shorten, which is going to increase the amount of paces that you have. So let's say it was 73. And then downhill, you're going to be able to open your stride up going downhill, so it's going to be a smaller number. So let's say it's 65. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my map that I'm going to travel, and by terrain association, which we talked about earlier in this video, we know by looking at the map what type of terrain we're going to be traveling. And it may be a combination of all of these. Let's say that there's no flat ground that we're going to be walking. It's either going to be uneven, uphill, or downhill. And let's say that the majority of it is going to be both uphill and downhill with just a little bit of unevenness in there. But mostly we're going to be doing this. Up and down, up and down, up and down. If you're in the state of Ohio, Kentucky, Southern Indiana, places like that, Virginia, it's going to be a lot of this. It's not going to be a lot of this, let me tell you. So, what you're going to do is you're going to average those numbers. So if we figure that part of it's uphill, part of it's downhill, some of it's on uneven ground, I can take those three numbers, add them together, okay? 8, 6 and 7 is 13, 7 more is 20, 208 divided by 3. Follow my hillbilly math. Dividing by 3 gives me an average of those numbers. 3 goes into 26 times, that's 18. 28, 3 times 7 is 28. So 67 is going to be my average pace count. That understanding is what I need for dead reckoning. Now when I shoot my azimuth or I plug in my bearing to a known location, I know that my pace count for every 100 meters is going to be 67. I can look at my map and I can measure on my map how far I think that's going to be in meters. And as I'm walking, I'm dropping pacing beads. Every 67 paces, I'm dropping a pacing bead. And if my target area is, let's say, 1 kilometer away, when I've dropped 9 beads down for 900 meters, and I'm getting ready to drop the next bead down, I should be right on top of where I'm supposed to be, as long as I've kept the needle in the doghouse, thread in the shed, whatever you want to call it, and I know that I'm walking in a straight line for my bearing. Dead reckoning would tell me I should be right on top of my target at that point. And that is where pace counting comes in very handy, especially for longer distances. If I'm shooting an azimuth from one hilltop to another, and that hilltop is 2.5K away, according to my map, and I start pace counting, it might take me an hour or an hour and a half to get there. But once I pace count, I'm gonna lose track of the time of day unless I have a watch or how far I've walked. But by pace counting, I can keep track of that in my head very easily and say, hey, I've walked too far and I've missed my target because I've walked 400 or 500 meters more than I should have. And you won't want to just give up after 100 meters too far, because things are going to be changing. There's variables all the time. This average number is only that. It's an average. So it may not be exactly perfect. I would walk a couple 300 meters too far before I decided I'd missed my target. Then if I don't see my target, I might say, okay, wait a minute. Let me travel back in a reverse azimuth to my last known point, or a reverse azimuth back exactly 300 meters to where I think I was supposed to be, and let me take another look at things and see where I'm supposed to be. That's how you can use pace counting to your advantage. Okay, so let's go back to our map for a minute, guys. Laying my compass on the map, getting it lined up in a grid square at the corner of a grid square, and figuring my declination difference. If I move this map until the needle's in the doghouse, I've got it associated to the terrain. Now I can put this back to north, not worry about it. The map appears exactly as I'm looking at the terrain. Going back to our exercises from the past videos, traveling from this hilltop to the wetland area, I can lay my compass on the map right in the middle of the wetland area, turn the dial so that the needle's in the doghouse, and that will give me a bearing of travel, which is about 80 degrees or thereabouts. And as long as I keep the needle in the doghouse while I'm walking a straight line on that bearing. Now, here's where the dead reckoning comes in, or the pace counting, to equate to dead reckoning. Now I can take my scale on the side of my compass, which is in centimeters, and when we looked at the scale of this map, 1 centimeter equaled 100 meters. That's what I like. Everything's simple. So if I measure that, I've got about 7 centimeters to go to the center of that wetland area. That tells me I've got to travel 700 meters. What that means is that when I'm traveling and I'm pace counting, if we look at our average pace count, I believe was something like 67, 68, something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was now. But what I'm going to do is, as I'm traveling, I'm going to be dropping these beads every time I get to that number. So if it's, let's just say 70 for even number sake of purpose here, when I count to 70 on the same foot, I drop a bead. What this is telling me is that when I have 7 beads down, when I've got to the 7th bead, and there's 9 beads on here, so when I've got 7 down at the bottom, like this, I should be right on top of this area. Now, I'm not using any kind of backstop. This becomes my backstop. This tells me I've traveled as far as I'm supposed to travel, and it's given me a dead reckoning to that location. If I'm right here now at 7 and I don't see the location, I'm going to travel a little further. But I might even see it before I get to 7. Because your pace count's going to be off a little bit, it's going to vary. Remember that you're talking about an average. So I might travel another 100 meters, maybe a little further before I would turn around and backtrack my steps on a reverse azimuth. But once I get 7 beads down, if everything's correct on this map and I've got my distance factored in right, I've got my azimuth right, and my pace count's right, then I can say pretty assuredly that if I travel on this bearing this many beads or this many paces, I'm going to get to that water area. That becomes my backstop at that point to tell me, hey, you've gone far enough. Okay, guys, well, I hope that simple explanation of dead reckoning and pacing beads helped you out. Go out into the field, get your pace count set up on different types of terrain and get them logged in a notebook. Keep them with you with your compass and your map. Then you will be able to practice dead reckoning on your own, and you'll be able to adjust things as needed, because it may not work out perfect. A lot of people I see in classes tend to overstep when they're practicing their pace count. In other words, they lay that 100 meters out and they get excited and they try to step out. You don't want to do that. You want to walk that as you normally would walk. If you're going to be carrying a heavy backpack when you travel, something like that, put it on. It's going to change your pace count. It's going to slow you down. It's going to decrease your pace. So make sure that you think about all those things when you're factoring your pace count into your notebook. I'm Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. I appreciate you joining me for another video. I thank you for everything you do for me, for my school, my family, my affiliates, my sponsors, and my friends. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.